Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Francess McDonnell and with me today is my colleagues Aisling O'Brien and also Colm Ryan. Now there's one unavoidable subject that everyone in farming is talking about at the moment, and that is of course the weather. For months now farmers have been plagued by rain and it doesn't like it's going to ease anytime soon, as potato and tillage farmer Patrick Dehane of Old Town in North County Dublin told Agriland recently.
This isn't a single year incident, this is compounded from last year already, and there are a lot of growers who are under financial stress as it is, and this is going to break people.
And you can see more of that interview with Patrick Dehane on Agriland.ie. But what is the latest outlook, Aisling, now on the weather?
Yeah, Francis, I'd say like Patrick and along with all of the farmers across the country, they're constantly checking on weather forecasts from Éireann, from YR, Carlow Weather and more. And I'd say there's many the Child of Prague statue now that's nearly washed away on farms across the country. So at the National Fodder and Food Security Committee meeting, which took place on Tuesday, we got a briefing from Éireann on the longer term weather outlook. And we heard that there will be, unfortunately, around another 10 days of rain, but then high pressure is expected to set in over Ireland later this month. Now, Owen Sherlock, he's the chief hydrometeorologist and senior meteorologist with Éireann, said that the current indications are that high pressure may arrive in Ireland by the middle of the month, which around April 17th, he said. So essentially the middle of next week. Now, the good news is that once high pressure is established, it tends to stay in place for a period of time, and it generally means no rain. But now for the not so good news, Owen Sherlock did tell us that the current weather models suggest that there will be a gradual decline in the high pressure towards the end of the month and into the start of May. And he said he was reasonably confident with this outlook that there would be rain for the next 7 to 10 days, which then would be followed by high pressure for the following 5 to 7 days. So that's the outlook as things stand in terms of the weather ahead, Francis. But as the weather goes, and as farmers will well know, we'll give a health warning with that outlook as well. And hopefully he's right and that we will get that much needed respite from the rain.
Yeah, it's deeply frustrating and also very depressing for farmers, isn't it?
Absolutely. Like, I think farmers are too depressed to be angry at this stage because it's just relentless rain. I'm looking out the window here in Kerry this morning, and it's that soft rain, another soft day in Kerry, and that soft rain is soaking into land that has nothing to give it at all. There's nowhere for it to go. And it's the same all over the country. Look, there's farmers out there who luckily are getting animals out for a few hours by day. And, they're doing the best that they can. But in other areas, if animals were left out, they would just absolutely destroy fields. So it is very, very hard, depending on where you are and the type of land that you have.
Yeah, and it does appear that the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Charlie McConalogue, was listening to farmers this week.
Yeah, so the mood music had been set ahead of the National Fodder Committee meeting on this, Francis, because several days beforehand, Charlie McConalogue said that he'd asked officials in the Department of Agriculture to look at rolling out a fodder transport subsidy scheme similar to that which we saw back in the fodder crisis of 2018. So the minister joined the committee meeting, which was held online, to outline the details of what is being called the Fodder Transport Support Measure. And the scheme is going to provide additional help to livestock farmers most severely affected by the prolonged exceptional weather conditions. And he said that the new scheme would be operated through the co-op network around the country as it's needed by farmers. Now, there are differing subsidy rates applying to hay, fodder, beet, straw and silage for feeding, which has to be transported over a distance of 75 kilometres to come to a co-op for distribution then to farmers. And there will be a financial contribution towards the offsetting of the transport costs of the fodder, and that payment will be made available to co-ops. And the subsidy rates, they range from €20 for a 4x4 bale of hay or straw for feeding up to €40 per tonne for pit silage or fodder beet. And we've a full breakdown on Agriland of the rates. And we are hearing from co-ops that are already getting fodder to farms through the scheme. And it was noted, Francis, though, that forage purchased prior to the 31st of March inclusive is ineligible for this scheme as well. And if you want to avail of it, you can get an application form from the Department of Agriculture website. And to avail of the scheme, farmers must complete an application form and submit it. And also they have to have a completed co-op declaration form as well, signed by the co-op that they're going to source the fodder from. So they're the T's and the C's. And just one other thing to note as well, that eligibility to receive funding under this scheme is dependent on farmers remaining within a €20,000 individual aid limit between 2021 and 2024. That's just, I suppose, to comply with EU state aid rules as well. And look, the minister said that it is, as you said, a really stressful and a lonely time for farmers across the country, across all enterprises. And he again reiterated what we were saying last week on the podcast, that it's important that everybody at a local level reaches out and supports one another at this time, because it's particularly difficult. And we heard as well that Teagasc has put in place a fodder register. Now, that's not going to set price or anything like that, but it's just aiming to link up farmers with one another as well. That register is in place if you want to get onto Teagasc and find out about the availability of fodder in your local area. And it's also set up phone lines as well. These helplines that have been set up by Teagasc. They're available to all farmers, regardless if you're a Teagasc client or not. And there's 2 different helplines for tillage and for grassland farmers, going to be available for a 2-week period up to Saturday, the 20th of April. They're available Monday to Saturday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And you can leave a voicemail outside of those hours if you want, and somebody will give you a call back from Teagasc. And you can find details of those numbers on Agriland. And just a reminder that they are available to all farmers as well. And look, the last thing in terms of supports as well, Francis, we are hearing a lot of calls on the banks and what the banks are doing to help farmers at the moment.
I was going to ask you about that, because obviously any measures are really welcome at this time, particularly whenever you see farmers who are on a critical line with fodder. But we are hearing a lot about cash flow on farms at the moment too. So that is an issue.
It's a huge issue for some farmers out there. I mean, the fodder scheme is all well and good, but if you're having problems paying for this fodder, that is a huge issue. So Bank of Ireland and AIB told the committee this week of the updates on the supports that they are offering for farmers. Bank of Ireland told us that it has reduced downwards its outlook for farm profitability this year, unsurprisingly. They said they don't see a significant uplift coming in terms of commodity prices to curtail the potential reduced output, be that milk or grain yields from tillage farmers. And Owen Lowry, the head of agriculture with the bank, said they're not seeing a significant uptake in applications in recent weeks. But that's not to say that there aren't farmers in financial or cash flow difficulty out there. And he said that overdraft utilisation rates are trending at similar lows to this time last year at around 14%. And he said that means that there is plenty of overdraft capacity on the majority of facilities. He said that they are prioritising agricultural applications through their system to make sure that they flow swiftly to drawdown stage. And that was echoed as well by Donal Welton, the head of Agri with AIB. He said that all bank staff in AIB have been updated on the impact of what is happening on farms due to the weather. And he said that they will be making it as smooth as possible for farmers to access credit where they need. And he said that working capital requests from farmers will be prioritised by staff. And both banks told us that they're going to be launching campaigns, information campaigns through the media over the coming weeks to highlight the financial products that they have on offer to help farmers as well. So that's where we stand from the banks at the moment, Francis.
Yeah, I was talking to one farmer during the week and he said, look, if you look at it like this, I have 2 bank accounts. One is nearly drained, that is his own bank account. And the other one is his slurry account, as he talks about. And he said it's now overflowing.
Yeah, that is a huge problem for a lot of farmers out there, Francis. And we did get some advice from the Department of Agriculture on this week. And look, a lot of farmers out there might roll their eyes when they hear this advice because, trafficability out on land in some areas it's just not good enough for any sort of spreading to be done. So the department acknowledged that the conditions are very challenging, and they said where slurry tanks are full, farmers should look at opportunities to apply small volumes of slurry on their driest and most suitable fields. And they said that care should be taken, as is always the advice around slurry, to maintain the maximum buffer zone possible, not to spread slurry too close to any water courses or drains, and to avoid waterlogged soil and periods where heavy rain is forecast. I think a lot of farmers out there will say, well, when is that?
Very small window, isn't there, for most people now at this stage?
Absolutely, yeah. And they said, look, where the option to spread isn't possible on farms, farmers should look at exporting slurry to other tanks if that is possible. And we are hearing, that requests are being made, by farmers to other farmers for that to happen as well out there. Because look, there's nothing worse than seeing animals standing in an overflowing flatted unit as well. And nobody wants to see that happening, Frances, out there. So, it is something that if you are in trouble with it, to reach out to your advisor, to your neighbours, to the department even, to get an understanding ear, because they do understand that this is a very, very difficult time for farmers out there. And look, if the options that we've just talked about aren't available, farmers should contact their local authority as well to examine other safe options prior to taking any action. So that is another option for farmers out there as well. But definitely, it's another massive headache for farmers out there as a result of the weather. It's not just fodder, slurry tanks now getting very full or overflowing at this stage.
Yeah, it really is all about the community that you're in at the moment, isn't it? We've heard this about the mental stress on farmers, but actually it's actually knowing who you can export slurry to that might just give you that break that you're looking for.
Yeah. And look, I mean, in some cases, then unfortunately, maybe somebody that you have linked up with in the past mightn't have the capacity themselves to take, your extra slurry on at the moment. So that's another issue that we're hearing about, Frances, across the ground. But look, it is something that is important. We don't need to tell farmers that that is a huge issue. It could potentially be a welfare issue for cattle as well in sheds. So it just to reach out if you are having a huge difficulty at the moment, and hopefully whether it's your advisor, maybe a neighbour, or maybe the department or the local authority can offer you some options.
I know we've had the move by the Minister in relation to the fodder situation, but there was noticeable disappointment this week that no provision has been made for other farmers, particularly tillage farmers.
Yeah, that's for sure. Minister Charlie McConalogue told the committee meeting this week that he's not going to rule anything out in terms of what might be needed to support the tillage sector through the current poor spell that we've been speaking about in recent weeks. He said that he's closely monitoring the situation facing tillage farmers, and he said that every day that goes past raises the stakes and the challenge and the anxiety around what the planting season is going to hold. And he said he's going to be looking at the existing budget within his own department to see what can be done as the situation evolves. And he said, of course, what we'd all hope for is for the weather to improve and for people to be able to get out onto fields. But that hasn't happened so far. Look, we did hear from Michael Hennessy, the head of the crops division in Teagasc at the meeting as well. And he said in some cases, medium to wetland, Frances, it could take 14 days at least for that land to dry out just to be able to go out and plant or to plough or to do whatever work you need. So that is the level of window that some farmers need around the country.
And we know at this case, it may be too late for some.
Yeah, well, it could be too late for certain crops. And, we did hear that the selection of crops is very specific to individual farms, and farmers were being advised to sit down and see what kind of yields, they would potentially get from different crop options on their land. And again, that's just one of those things, whether it's your discussion group, your advisor, having a chat with other tillage farmers out there just to see what could be the options for you at the moment. But look, unfortunately, in terms of a financial package from the department, it doesn't seem to be forthcoming at the moment, because the minister pointed to the comments from the Taoiseach and the Minister for Public Expenditure that there isn't any capacity or possibility of a mini budget or fresh funding for tillage farmers out there. And of course, that was met with huge disappointment and anger from, those within the sector, including Bobby Miller from the Irish Grain Growers Group. And he said he was extremely disappointed about the lack of commitment shown by the minister on this matter. And he said, that there is measures being rolled out for livestock farmers, for fodder and everything like that for them. There seems to be nothing forthcoming for tillage farmers who, some might argue are facing a more precarious situation because it's their entire livelihood if they can't get their spring crops planted or indeed do necessary work on the winter crops that are currently in the ground. We heard that there's a lack of fertilizer being spread on those crops. Weed control is back on where it should be as well. So, I think that there is pressure, huge pressure coming on the minister to do something for the tillage sector at the moment. But
we've been hearing this week, it isn't just this year that tillage farmers have been suffering. There is that legacy from last year too. So they're really up against it on that side.
Yeah, a lot of farmers were coming off a horrendous 2023 in terms of planting as well. Very, very difficult back end of 2023 to even get those winter crops in the ground. They were doing well to do that. And now it seems that it's a knock-on effect into this year as well. And, there was a lot of talk about the strong corporation measure and the merits about that, when it comes to straw availability, maybe for livestock farmers. But those, I suppose, within the tillage sector from the farm organisations spoke about the positivity that has brought to the tillage industry, perhaps at a dark time. The strong corporation measure has been a very positive measure within the tillage sector. But yeah, look, I think all options are being looked at according to the minister at the moment. And look, we did hear from the department as well, the deputy chief inspector at the department, Louise Byrne as well, who said that she did acknowledge that there is an ask there, because we heard from Bobby Miller and from Kieran McAvoy from the IFA Grain Committee as well that the mood within the tillage sector at the moment is on the floor and it needs something to be done, Frances, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's going to be a big challenge for Minister McConalogue because he has said he wants to increase the tillage area. So it's really going to be, let's watch this space and see what happens. And I'm just going to bring in here my colleague, Colm Ryan, because while many farming communities across the country are struggling this week, there's one in particular for who flooding has become a way of life. Isn't that true, Colm, as you've been finding out at Lough Funshinagh? What's been happening there with all the excessive rainfall?
Yeah, so I spoke with Padraig Beattie. He's a farmer at Lough Funshinagh in County Roscommon. He's a suckler and sheep farmer. Like many farmers across the country, Padraig does have concerns about fodder, about housing his animals as well. He told me that he does have sufficient silage for 10 more days to feed his livestock. He can stretch it, however, to maybe 15 to 16 days if he's able to get out some of his lighter stock. That is depending on the weather over the next few days. But Padraig, he does have the added concern of being a resident of Lough Funshinagh, which means that the risk of flooding is just growing on a daily basis. So the water levels at the lake at the moment, they are at record levels. So it does remain to be seen over the next few days what the weather is like, whether those levels may continue to rise. But certainly farmers in the area surrounding the lough, they are deeply concerned over what that weather can bring. Padraig especially, where he is situated, there are pumps running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to keep the water away from both his farmyards and his own home. And just earlier this week, one of those pumps failed just for a half an hour, but that was enough then for the water levels to immediately rise and to approach his home. Luckily enough, though, a county council worker who was working nearby did switch back on a standby pump that was able to begin to pump the water back out of where it was rising. So luckily, they were able to prevent that from getting worse. But no, certainly it is a problem that is growing on a daily basis for the residents surrounding the lake.
And stay with us, Colm, because this week you've also been covering the latest on the National Sheep Welfare Scheme. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so the National Sheep Welfare Scheme opened for applications this week, and there are 4 actions in the scheme that applicants must complete 2 of in order to get a full payment. So there are 2 categories that farmers can choose from to select an action. So the 2 categories are Category A and Category B. So in Category A, applicants can select either shearing or body condition scoring of ewes and the appropriate follow-on management from the body condition scoring. So that action has to be carried out twice just for the body condition scoring. The completion of either of these actions will result in a €4 per ewe payment. In category B, applicants can choose either a clostridial vaccination of ewes or plunge dipping to control external parasites as their action, and the completion of one of these actions will then result in a €4 per ewe payment. And so with both a category A and a category B action complete, applicants then will be eligible for the full €8 per ewe payment. And so the actions then for each category, they must be completed by the 15th of October this year. And that is something that was questioned by the ICSA President, Sean McNamara, who welcomed the scheme, but he did call that mid-October deadline impractical for hill sheep farmers, as he said their livestock would not be able to be managed as they'd still be grazing. So McNamara, he has called for a mid-November deadline, as he said this would allow those farmers to bring in their sheep to carry out those actions.
Thanks, Colm. And let's just look at milk prices now for a moment. The Arnua Purchase Price Index for the month of March has seen a slight increase to 132.3 points, up from 131.5 points last month. This index figure implies an indicative return of 37.6 cents a litre, including fat for milk at 3.5% fat and 3.3% protein, which the business said is net of its cost to market. This price is an increase of 0.3 cents a litre on last month's indicative return. And Lakeland Dairies has released details of its March milk price. The co-op will pay 42.9 cents a litre for March milk supplies, which includes an increase in the base price and the introduction of an input support payment. It's also announced an increase in the feed support for farmers who purchase feed from the co-op. And of course, we have more on that story on Agriland.ie. Now, despite all the storm clouds and non-stop rain, the sun appeared to be shining for at least one man this week, Aisling, on his way into the Dáil to make history.
Well, that's true, Francis, because we got a new Taoiseach this week in Fine Gael leader Simon Harris, who has officially replaced Leo Varadkar. We also saw a cabinet reshuffle, although some political commentators would say that Simon Harris didn't go far enough in that reshuffle. But it's as it was in Ag House, because Charlie McConalogue, Martin Hayden and Pippa Hackett are all still in situ, in case you've been looking at matters political this week. But similar to the weather, Francis, the political sunshine was but fleeting for Simon Harris. The storm clouds did gather on his official first day at work, because he came in for stinging criticism from the opposition benches as he failed to appear for leaders' questions in the Dáil. Instead, he embarked on a slew of phone calls with world leaders. But ahead of Harris receiving his seal of office from President Michael D. Higgins on Tuesday, farmers, I suppose, they got a taste of his approach to the sector at the Fine Gael Ardèche last weekend. Have a listen to some of what Simon Harris had to say.
But I want to say to farmers and to rural Ireland, Fine Gael will never talk down to you on climate action. Instead, we'll sit down and we'll work with you and we'll work for you. We won't lecture you, because I want to engage in a new partnership on agriculture where farmers are central to the changes that we're making. For example, I want to implement the agri-environment strategies, like the biomethane strategy, so that farmers can earn a good income while protecting our environment. And I'll work with you and I'll support you so that together we retain Ireland's nitrates derogation, which is necessary for our agri-food sector.
So there you go, Francis, the youngest Taoiseach in the history of the state there, Simon Harris, pledging to have farmers' backs and not to dictate or to lecture to him. And I suppose in a nod to his previous role in higher education, he pledged to roll out those long-awaited vet schools as well. And he did tell us that Fine Gael has held 15 meetings across the country with farmers, and he has asked the party's agricultural group to come forward with a plan within the next 6 weeks on how Fine Gael intends to act on issues like succession, retirement, and other stresses facing the farming community. So I think perhaps a sign that the party is starting a fight to hold on to their traditional farmer voting base there, who could be tempted by others when the ballot boxes come out, Francis. But only time will tell if Simon Harris's, wooing of the farming community will pay off.
Yeah, I wonder, does our new Taoiseach think that despite the fact that we've had this non-stop rain, the clouds parted and the sun was shining for him as if it was a sign from above as he steps into the Dáil?
I think so. Well, look, we'll wish him well, and we'll see how he gets on and for how long he'll be there, because I don't know, would you bet on a general election this year or next? Place your bets.
I wouldn't put money on the table on it
There
at the
you
moment.
go. But a week is a long time in politics, an hour, a day is a long time in politics. So we'll have to see.
We'll definitely be following to see how the new Taoiseach approaches what's happening and all the challenges that there are in rural communities now. And finally, we know there is at least one farmer in your neck of the woods, Aisling, who has something to smile about this week.
Yes, indeed, Frances. A great day for the parish, as the saying goes. Mark Reardon from Kinmare Mochra in Kerry took home the top prize at the Mr. Personality Festival, which is one of the centerpieces of the calendar for Mochra. It took place in Clonmel in County Tipperary on April 5th and 6th, and Reardon beat out competition from 25 other contestants from Mochra clubs around the country, including Stephen Murray from Scottstown Mochra in Monaghan, who came in second place, and Micheál Kilheaney from Mount Mellick Mochra in County Laois, who came in third. Well done to them as well. So Mark Reardon, Mr. P, as he's now known, I'm sure, in the locality and further afield, he farms in Kinmare in the south of Kerry, where he has a herd of 40 Limousine Charolais Cross cows with his father. And Charles O'Donnell, our colleague in the newsroom, caught up with him this week and did a really interesting interview about where Mark sees the whole area of part-time farming. And, you know, he did speak about the trouble, the pressure that part-time farming is facing and the danger that it's in potentially if it isn't supported. And he spoke about the importance of it as well. You know, he took up a role as well with Dairygold in 2022. So he has an off-farm job through their graduate program. And, you know, he was speaking to, I suppose, a lot of people out there, Frances, who have farm jobs and then off-farm jobs as well to do on a daily basis. And how so many people, that is their way of farming. They're not farming full-time. They're not relying on the land or can't maybe make the land work for a full-time living for them. But, you know, that is a way of life for so many people around the country. And it's something that has to be protected as well. And look, we did hear that Mark has organised walks on his farm as well through his time in Kerry Mochra. And he said that he thinks it's very important that we're all in farming together. And it's nice to see other people and what they're doing out there. And the 24-year-old went on to say that the Mr. Personality title is whatever you want it to be. And I've no doubt, Frances, given his track record to date, it sounds like he's going to make this role his own. So we wish Mark the very best of luck and congratulations to him and up the kingdom.
And it goes without saying that we know lots of personalities in farming at this stage, so he's not alone.
That's it. Very true.
That's it from us for another week. From Aisling, Colm and myself, thanks for listening, and please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We hope you have a really good week ahead.